A very good afternoon. It's good to see so many people at the closing keynote. So thank you very much for spending the next 40 minutes with me. Now, digital transformation, or DX for short, has accelerated from an emerging topic to a mega theme over the last 5 years. Now, during this period of time, IDC had worked with more than 5,000 organizations all over the world, half of which in Asia Pacific and 800 in ASEAN alone. Now, in this journey towards digital transformation and becoming a true master of digital transformation, in the last 15 months, we have seen the pace of acceleration heighten. Digital disruption is intensifying in every industry. Now, DX itself is being reinvented. Now, unlike in the past, when we look at digital disruption, the primary source of disruption were from startup companies and born in the cloud organizations. Today, we see industry incumbent brands, the so-called traditional organization, investing in DX with the primary intent to disrupt the marketplaces that they compete in. And our research also shows that 40% of organizations across the Asia-Pacific region are what we classify as digitally determined. Digitally determined organizations are organizations that look at DX from a long-term perspective in terms of commitment, investment, as well as change management. Now, digitally determined organizations work with other organizations in order to create new markets and disrupt status quo. The race towards individual transformation of industry is creating new digital economies. Take the automotive manufacturing industry as an example. When you look at the players and talk to the brands in that industry today, they are no longer thinking about just monetization from the sale of vehicles. They are also looking at commercialization in what they call the auto passenger economy that includes advertisement, entertainment applications, insurance services, and so on and so forth. And we see that happening in other industry. If you look at the energy industry, we see the rise of microgrid economy. Of course, perhaps the most popular is the last mile economy, thanks to Amazon and Alibaba competing aggressively along with basically a slew of startup companies all over the world fighting for a slice of this particular marketplace. And of course, the open banking economy, we see banks, we see insurance institutions working with other organizations, other industry to expand financial inclusion all over the world. And as we move forward, we are going to see more and more of digital economies being built in the marketplace. Now, this race and this reinvention is creating a new benchmark for organizations. And this new benchmark is what IDC called the future enterprise. Now, the future enterprise is essentially talking about the mastery of 5 dimensions. And these dimensions are distinct, but they are also interrelated. And when we think about these 5 masteries, we think about how organizations are going through their strategy and they are going through their transformation moving forward. The future enterprise is really IDC's vision of how firms must invest, must organize themselves to actually play and compete in increasingly digital-centric markets. Now, this framework is to provide digitally determined organizations a basis for them to assess their journey to an end state, and this end state will incorporate the 5 key elements of agility, of resiliency, of empathy, of empowerment, as well as intelligence, all at scale. And this is what the future enterprise is all about. Throughout the presentation, I'll be going through each of these 5 masteries and how you can actually achieve these masteries as you think about, as you look at technologies, as you create new digital capabilities to compete differently in order to be more effective in the DX economy. Let's start with the very first mastery, future of culture. Now, it is important to talk about this because over the last 5 years, when we work with organizations, regardless of the industry that you play in, regardless of what geography that you compete in, culture is the #1 challenge in all organizations. everyone is talking about how can I make my organization effective from a culture perspective, because that sets the foundation for digital transformation. So at the most advanced level, we are talking about comprehensive and transformational culture that runs deep and wide across the organization. And there is flexibility as well as collaboration that are deeply ingrained within the organization. And the organizational structures are always evolving in order to adapt to the changes in the marketplace. Now, future of culture is at the very root of digital transformation. Culture reboot is a must-do for all digitally determined organizations. Now, not many organizations have actually been able to successfully master this. The flavors in terms of future of culture really vary, depend on kind of your traditional legacy. It also varies in terms of how competitive the marketplace that you operate in. But I thought I'd share with you 3 very quick examples to show how these 3 particular brands have done extremely well in rebooting their culture, and today they compete extremely well in this DX economy. So the first is DHL. We all know the brand very well. DHL is very well known in terms of their ability to harness technologies to create new digital capabilities for their organization. Their culture is really about collaboration, the ability to translate technology and experiment technology into meaningful work processes for the people. The organization is also very good at articulating the benefits of DX, not only from a DHL perspective, but for the individual that work within DHL. And this is really critical because it goes back to the core of every single employee within the organization. If you look at IKEA, IKEA has always been very innovative. If you look at their R&D, they're very well known in terms of coming up with new products and services that truly wow the customers. And for IKEA is the ability to co-create with their customers, the ability to co-create with the ecosystem partner that set them apart. For them, customer centricity is at the core of their culture. And then lastly, of course, we're in Singapore, we need to talk about DBS Bank. They've transformed extremely well from the development bank of Singapore to now the digital bank of the world. And for DBS, the culture is really about being creative, the ability to experiment, as well as a good understanding of using KPIs and data to truly measure the new organizational value as a result of their transformation initiatives. Now, this race towards the leadership at scale is really all about the ability of the organization to reinvent continuously so as to stay ahead of the marketplace. Take the coffee industry. I mean, most of us drink coffee or tea, right? And so I thought I'd pick an industry that everybody can relate to. Now, some of you have heard me talk about the Starbucks transformational story. It's a fantastic story where it was able to create a loyalty program from a paper and pen world into the mobile world, and then getting into their roastery reserve stores. Their Shanghai store is the largest in the world, very successful. It gave Starbucks the courage to enter into the Italian market for the very first time. So they opened up their first store in Italy, in Milan, just about 6 months ago. And as a result of that, they were able to challenge the Italian strongholds, right? Ilia, Lavazza were some of the strongest brands in the marketplace, especially for the Italians, right? They look at American coffee and say, oh, that's not great coffee, right? Same as the Australians. So, but from a Starbucks perspective, it's not, they don't just stand still in terms of the way that they transform. They enter into the Italian market, and then, they look back at the Chinese market. And in recent time, they actually face major disruption from the fastest growing company in China, Luckin. Luckin, if you are familiar with the Chinese market, you come from the Chinese market or you visit there, you will know that this is a digital native enterprise. It prides itself being digital with its digital first strategy. It does not accept cash, everything is digital and mobile payment. Its coffee is 20% cheaper. Obviously, that helps. But more importantly, it's able to deliver coffee to wherever your office or your home location in under 30 minutes from the time that you place order, or else the coffee is free of charge. And so what Starbucks did was they saw that disruption and they quickly jumped back, worked with Alibaba, and today you are able to actually get delivery services from Starbucks in at least 10 cities in China. By the end of this year, this will expand to 2,000 stores across 30 cities all over that country. So it's really about this constant reinvention, and it's never sitting still that we talk about this race toward leadership at scale. So that's the first mastery. Now let's look at the second mastery, and here we talk about future of customers. Everyone loves to talk about this topic. This is typically the first initiative as far as DX is concerned for a lot of brands, particularly in the business-to-consumer segment place. Now, future of customer, here is where IDC, we talk about empathy at scale. I'm sure you heard about companies talking about personalization. And we at IDC believe that personalization is critical. You need to understand your customer extremely well. But empathy is really about understanding and sharing the feelings of the other person. So it signifies basically a deep relationship between the brand and their customers. So having that deep relationship is what future of customers is all about. And this is going to be that critical competitive differentiator as we move forward. Now, we talk about future of customers, we need to talk about super apps. Now, super apps is really a platform of apps where it caters to a wide variety of consumption requirements through an ecosystem that is anchored by a specific player. It started off with WeChat from China, and is still today the most successful super app in the world. But in the Southeast Asia region, the biggest battleground is between Grab and Gojek. And for those of us who live here or in Southeast Asia, you will know this brand extremely well. And they are fighting aggressively and trying to disrupt one another through the super apps platform. Now, we're beginning to see this getting into large industry players, your traditional brands in Indonesia, in Thailand, and then the digital disruptors in India. Now, it doesn't matter whether your brand or your industry believe in super apps or individual apps. At the end of the day, it is really about the power of ecosystem. It's about the creation of digital powerhouses. And that's really critical in terms of achieving empathy at scale. And I have here an example from an otherwise traditional brand. Now, this is Lipo Group from Indonesia. Lipo Group is the largest B2C conglomerate in Indonesia. It has 120 million customers. It plays in a wide variety of industry, mostly in the B2C space. In the early 2017, it set up a big data platform and business unit called OVO. And the intent is really bring a new disruptive business model and operating approach into the marketplace. Now, if you work for a family-owned conglomerate or a large conglomerate with many different kind of businesses, you'll be able to appreciate this, right? You have a lot of subsidiaries within the group, and every subsidiary typically will just kind of play their own game, and they tend to be very standalone. You don't always share databases, you don't always share customer information. And so what OVO and Lipo Group did was to bring together data across all of Lipo's subsidiaries. And today, for at least 19 million of their customers, so 15% of their customers, they are able to actually go deep into these customers. They have up to 100 persona profiles for these 19 million customers. And if that's not empathy at scale, I don't know what is. So Lipo is a great example of a traditional organizations that have made that transformation and is truly achieving empathy at scale as they move forward. The third mastery is future of intelligence. And this is really about delivering insights at scale. Just a few years ago, when we think about analytics, right? And that was even, when we were not really thinking about AI or machine learning. The focus was really around data management and looking at deriving analytics of a specific area. This could be customer intelligence, this could be operational intelligence. But today, we are basically looking at how do we scale that with basically machine learning and human-machine networks coming together. And this is what Insights at Scale is all about. Now, if you take Allianz as an example, and for those of you in the insurance industry, you'll probably know this very well. Allianz is the world's largest insurance provider when you look at premiums, which are basically their revenue streams. But the most valuable brand in the insurance industry is Chinese Ping An. And so if you're an insurance institution, you would have heard of that name and you would be worried about the disruption that Ping An is bringing to the marketplace. So Allianz actually created an Asian lab here in Singapore, and the charter of this particular lab is really to leverage data science through technologies, through expertise, to create new monetization models, to go into new space, to anchor insurance in these new digital economies. And they have come up with quite a lot of different products and services in order to prevent fraud, in order to reduce costs, as well as to cater to new customer segments. And all of this is basically for them to defend against Ping An and to really reinvent themselves so that they can still be the #1 insurance provider, not only in terms of revenue, but also in terms of brand equity. So when you think about this race towards Insights at Scale, you need to think about who actually would produce these insights as you move forward in your organizations. Who makes the decisions with regards to insights and delivering insights to the right people? How are the decisions being made? And who actually act on this decision? And this is where IDC created 5 levels of AI-based automation, from human-led to machine control. So it gives basically organization a good understanding as you think about your workflow, as you think about your business process, the use cases that you're trying to experiment or you're trying to go into production, and think about where you actually place them in each of these boxes, because it will give you clarity in terms of the level of automation within the organization. What kind of talent shortage and gap do you have within the organizations? Can you train your existing people to narrow the gap? Do you have to go out to actually acquire new talent? Do you have the commitment from the board of directors, who are placing investment in terms of finding these people? Because a lot of these people are pretty expensive when we think about AI and when we think about data science. Now, we are not quite at the machine control stage yet. We're still quite some time ago. And if you look at the timeline, we are not actually expecting to get into what we call the AI winters between the 1950s to the early 2000s. We think that in about 5 years' time, this market will just start to explode and it will get this hockey stick as we move forward. And machine control at that point will really come in through a lot of commercial use cases. But if you look at the current existing point in time, we already have commercial use cases in what we call machine-led and human-governed. An example would be autonomous cars. And this is basically an illustration of this 4th layer of AI-based automation. So it's not really that you need to get quickly to layer 4 or layer 5. It's really looking at your individual work processes, what you're trying to achieve, the level of expertise that you have within the organizations. Do a gap analysis of what you need to actually acquire, what you need to train in order to get to these different boxes, and how these different boxes will actually serve your transformational objectives as you move forward. The next mastery is about future of operations. Now, when we think about operations and whether you are in the manufacturing industry, you are in process industry, you're in supply chain industry, Or you're in financial services industry, we all have operations within our organizations. And the complexity, particularly in the supply chain world, especially when you think about this quest for empathy at scale, is going to get more and more complex, right? And it's not just only about technology. If you truly want to know the customers very well and have built that very deep relationship, your entire supply chain, the ecosystem that you touch, the entire process is just going to be more and more complex. So how can you actually achieve that as you move forward? And this is where you need clarity in terms of understanding and looking at the kind of investments that you need to put in, from automation to autonomy. Now, automation is one of the hottest trends in the marketplace. A lot of industries have already begun to put in automation of work processes. RPA, robotic process automation, is one of the fastest growing segments in the technology world. A lot of organizations find it a lot easier to talk and to explain the benefits of automation, because cost savings is typically the first thing and the first benefit that organizations will gain as a result of automation. We are also beginning to see commercial usage of cognitive-based RPA in the marketplace. So AI and machine learning is definitely getting into the RPA world. We also see that in the robotic world from a hardware perspective, where robots, or we call them cobots, collaborative robots, they have basically machine learning capabilities, and they're able to self-learn as they go through the task. And that's the process that we are seeing where the marketplace is today. So from automation, which is traditional automation, that's singular task, now to machine learning, and then we will get into what we call the autonomy phase. Now at IDC, we talk about the autonomy chapter or the autonomy era, and we believe globally around 2023, so about 5 years from now, the autonomy era will actually kick in. And that's where we have autonomous processes. But as I was preparing for this presentation, and I says, look, I want to give examples of organizations that have already begun to take this journey and have commercially and have actually in production mode basically implemented autonomous processes, or somewhat of an autonomous process. And I went to look at the different examples, and I have here 2 examples from our region. The first example is, again, DBS Bank, because it's not easy to find an organization that have successfully embraced autonomy within the environment and create the kind of market impact. I'm sure some of you have experimented autonomous processes, but the impact in the marketplace is at least not felt yet. So if you look at DBS Bank, this was in 2016. They went into India, and when they went into India, they had a major task, and they were trying to figure out how can they penetrate into such a large consumer marketplace with so many people when they don't have any branch, right? And the traditional model is to have thousands and thousands of banking branches all across the country. Now, DBS Bank look at that from a financial standpoint, and they say it is not financially viable to basically roll out hundreds and thousands of banking branches in India. They also look at the dynamics of the customers that they were targeting. They were targeting at the younger generation, and India has one of the youngest population in the world. And India, as we all know, has a very high mobile penetration rate. So they decided to launch DigiBank, which is all mobile banking. There is no branch at all. And if you look at the standard processes within DigiBank, basically it's very minimum human intervention and human involvement. And they came to this realization because they realized that every time a human being is involved in any step of the banking process, it slows down the process and it adds cost to the environment. So the cost of serve would have gone up. So they decided to take this approach in a completely brand new market for them, within a year, they got 1 million customers on DigiBank, and is still today one of the most success stories within the organization. The second example is from China. This is Alibaba Sesame Credit. Now, Sesame Credit is basically a credit scoring system. And in China, at that time, there was no credit scoring system at all. And so what Alibaba did was basically through their ecosystem, and a lot of people were obviously going e-commerce, trading with SMB organizations, using Alipay, and there was a lot of information gathered about the Chinese population in general. And Alibaba has been actually investing in AI for the last 10 years. So this was actually their first successful product that is completely AI-based. Jack Ma called this the 310 system. It takes 3 minutes to determine an individual, a user's credit rating. And if the credit rating is favorable, it takes only 1 second to transfer money into the individual's Alipay account. And the entire process has 0 human involvement, which is why it is 310. So this is a true autonomous process example. Now, obviously, it's not a perfect product, but in a country where there was no credit scoring system, this was widely used by SMB institutions, by large corporations, by individuals. Even future mother-in-law use Sesame Credit to screen out basically their daughter's future husband. If you want to date my son or my daughter, show me your Sesame Credit score. And this was basically very widely known in the Chinese market. Now, autonomy is a very intriguing topic, right? And AI is such a hot topic in the marketplace, and I'm not saying this because we work in the IT industry or we're a technology practitioner and we should all know of AI. It doesn't matter the level of knowledge and expertise that we have, but we all know AI, where we all know analytics. But when you go and talk to people who are not from the same industry, all walks of life, they are all intrigued, they all talk about AI. Just last Friday, I came back from a conference in Chiang Mai, and the taxi uncle that took me from the airport, we had a full-on conversation about AI, and all he said to me was that AI is going to destroy humanity, and technology is basically the root of all evils. And when I told him that I work in IT, and he's like, no wonder you're such a big supporter of AI. So when you think about, the impact that it has on so many people, it's top of mind for people. As practitioner, as participant of technology industry, we need to play our part, whether this being for the good of the organization that you represent, or just for yourself and the future generation, your kids, your grandkids, and or even your friends' kids moving forward. You need to think about how can you truly harness AI so that we can get to this environment that is good for us from a human perspective, but also good for the organization. So as we think about the race towards resilience at scale, when we look at, from an operations perspective, we're moving very quickly into, as I said, this autonomy chapter, right? Today, we are at what we call the multiply innovation chapter or era, and which is why we're seeing this exponential speed of innovation coming, not only from born in the cloud players, but also from traditional organizations. As we get closer to in the next 5 years, we will get into this autonomy chapter where the goal is really about the ability to manage and to achieve hyper complexity at scale. And that is going to be the future. And I think that for a lot of us, we'll still be having our job or we'll still be working. And so you need to think about in that future, how are you going to help your organization and the job that you do in order to be able to achieve hyper complexity at scale? So the final mastery is about work model at scale, and this is what we call future of work. The last 4 years, we have been talking a lot around, and there's a lot of interest on how work is being done. I mean, I don't think that there was so much attention given to future of work until the last 2 to 3 years here in the Asia-Pacific region. Every organization that I've done consulting project with, regardless of whether they are a financial institution, they are from the retail sector, they're from hospitality, they're from oil and gas, they all want to talk about future of work. How would work be actually modified and transformed, and how can they be ready with it, and how can they shape this future as they move forward? And this is where we talk about the 3 pillars of future of work: workforce, work culture, and workspace. This is a big topic. This topic itself could take me 40 minutes, but I'm just going to give you kind of a quick run through of what each of the 3 pillars mean. So workforce, in the past, we think about the younger generation. We think about how can we, basically motivate the younger generation. How can we ensure that the older generation continue to contribute and harness the experience, as we compete differently in the DX economy. So this multi-generational focus was really what we're getting at. But now we've get to the point whereby it's no longer just about younger generation and older generation of humans. We are also now talking about how do we bring machines, whether this is hardware or software, into environment. This whole inclusion and diversity between humans and machine, what is the balance? South Korea, I think, is the first country, at least the first country that I've heard of recently, that just came out with this new regulation. They actually put a cap to the maximum automation in factories and manufacturing plants. And their logic for the South Korean government is because for human beings, when you work, you pay income tax. But machines, there is no income tax. So from a revenue perspective, for the South Korean government, they are worried about, basically, if they can continue to get the same amount, if not more, revenue tax from the population, if companies are using more and more robots within the manufacturing facilities. Some of them are going all robotic environment. So we will see new regulations coming into play as we, try to find the balance between humans and technology. The second is about work culture, and I talk a lot about leadership at scale, but this work culture is really talking about the people within the organization. Everyone talks about Google. Everybody says, I want to bring the Google culture into my environment. Even Google is not successful in everything, right? And not every organization of yours is the right model to take the Google culture within your organization. So you need to figure out what is the Google version that will apply for your organizations in order to achieve the digital goals that you want to achieve moving forward. Workspace is really about how you can leverage technologies, how you bring new digital capabilities within the organizations. If you look at the young generation, the millennial generation, regardless of educational qualifications, whether they are O-level graduates, whether they graduated from polytechnics or they are from university with bachelor degrees or master degrees, the large majority of this young generation, they are not interested in mundane tasks. So you need to bring some technology capabilities into their process in order to be able to entice them and motivate them. And that's what employee engagement is all about. Now, very few companies out there have mastered future of work and being very successful. Some of the examples are Lego, IKEA, Under Armour. And again, they have their own set of problems, but these are the 3 more successful ones, where they have managed to transform themselves and where their culture is, kind of more like the Google type, and it's actually serving them very well in terms of their competitive advantage. But I thought I'd share with you the Ping An example, given that it is the most valuable brand in the insurance industry, even though it is not the largest, and it only rise up over the last 3 to 4 years. And how can a traditional insurance provider who primarily play in the Chinese market can today be the most valuable brand in the world? Now, they pride themselves, and this is their own flavor of future of work. And again, it doesn't apply to everybody. They pride themselves of having this hybrid lamb versus wolf culture. And you can go and Google about it, in terms of Chinese culture from a lamb versus wolf management style. So their core business follows what they call the lamb culture, which is really, basically all about serving the customer, all about maintaining the stability within their ecosystem. And that's what they actually stand by in terms of the employees that work within their core business. But the employees that actually work in their new businesses, and today they have more than 10 startup companies, of which there are 4, they've already created 4 unicorns within the organization. For these subsidiaries and these employees, they follow what they call the WOOF culture. And the WOOF culture is really about being hungry, disruptive, and aggression. And that's kind of what they have built their culture and how they have been disrupting the marketplace, and their ability to have 23,000 software engineers within their environment, 500 big data experts to create this startup companies and this unicorn, and every single business unit must be able to stand on their own from a financial standpoint as they move forward. So that is an example of an organization that created significant and positive market impact, but as I said, it's not necessarily the culture that fits within your organization. So whether you are ready to be in this race or you're already in this race to reinvent the future, we believe that you need to create a new playbook. And this playbook must evolve because complexity is going to go up. Market dynamics will only continue, and they will continue in terms of pace and acceleration. But when we look at kind of all the companies that we work with, we talk to all the digital disruptors that we have engaged with, there are 3 common elements to this playbook. The first is everything that you do, large or small, it has to be about creating business value. You can be a technology person. The ability to create new organizational value must be top of mind for every single project, idea, and initiative that you are trying to execute moving forward. The ability to scale digital innovation. We have talked to some executives, and all they talk about is this one hugely successful digital innovation project that they have done. No matter how successful any project, if it's singular, the impact, it's not going to be great for the organization, certainly not in the marketplace. So you must be able to scale digital innovation throughout your organizations, as well as getting into your broader ecosystem. Third, and the final element is embrace future of work. And as I mentioned, every one of you will have your own flavor of future of work, but change is going to be critical. Culture reboot, as I said, is a must-do for all digitally determined organizations. So with that, thank you very much for coming to this closing keynote and for your attention. And good luck in your race to becoming the future enterprise. Thank you.